At 7 o'clock in the morning, my phone buzzed with that insistent vibration that rips you from the deepest sleep. I slowly opened my eyes, still groggy, and reached for the nightstand. It was a text message from Diane, my daughter-in-law. A picture. When I opened it, I felt the air rush out of my lungs. There she was, smiling, posing in front of a mountain of luggage at the airport. But it wasn't the image that made my blood run cold. It was the message accompanying it, written in all capital letters, as if it were a triumphant announcement. I'm moving in with you guys for good. I read those words once, twice, 3 times, hoping I had misunderstood. But no, there it was, for good. Those 2 words echoed in my head like a sentence. Before I could even process what I had just read, I heard a shout from the next room. It was Stephen, my son. His voice cut through the wall with an urgency I had never heard from him before. I got out of bed, still in my nightgown, and when I opened my bedroom door, I saw him running down the hall as if the house were on fire. He had his phone in his hand, the same picture, the same news. And his face, my God, his face was lit up by a mixture of panic and excitement that was almost painful for me to witness. Without saying a single word, without even looking at me, Stephen headed straight for the guest room. That room I had decorated with so much love, where I hosted my friends when they came to visit, where I kept my most precious memories. I heard him throw open the closet door, starting to pull out my things without any care. My dresses falling to the floor, my boxes of photos being dragged out, my books piling up against the wall as if they were trash. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching the scene with a mixture of disbelief and pain that tightened my chest. Stephen hadn't even turned around to explain what he was doing. It was as if I didn't exist, as if my opinion, my feelings, my space didn't matter at all. I finally found my voice, though it came out weaker than I would have liked. "Stephen, what are you doing?" I asked him, though the answer was painfully obvious. He stopped for a second, one of my favorite throws in his hands, and looked at me as if he had just remembered I lived in the house. "Mom, Diane is coming to stay. She needs this room. It's bigger, it has better light, and she's going to need the space for her stuff." His tone was mechanical, rehearsed, as if he had been preparing that explanation all the way from his room to here. "And me?" I asked, feeling my voice tremble despite my efforts to stay firm. "Where am I supposed to put my things?" Stephen made a vague gesture toward the back of the house, toward that small room that had once been a storage closet. "You can use the back room. It's enough for you. Besides, you don't need that much space." Those words hit me like a slap. I didn't need that much space. I, who had worked for 30 years cleaning other people's houses to buy this property. I, who had paid every dollar of the mortgage with the sweat of my brow. I, who had put this house in Stephen's name because he was my only child, and I wanted to ensure his future. And now, in my own house, they were relegating me to a small utility room as if I were a stranger. But I didn't say anything. I swallowed, clenched my fists inside the pockets of my nightgown, and simply nodded. I watched Stephen continue to empty the room, piling my belongings in the hallway without any care, preparing the space for his wife as if he were clearing out an old warehouse. 2 hours later, I heard the taxi stop in front of the house, the sound of the car door closing, the determined footsteps climbing the porch stairs, and then that voice. That high-pitched, triumphant voice I had already learned to recognize and fear. "I'm here!" Diane yelled from the entrance, as if she owned the place. I heard Stephen run downstairs to greet her. I heard their kisses, their laughter, their words of welcome. And I, from my new room in the back of the house, that tiny space that smelled of dampness and where my bed barely fit, remained silent, organizing my things into boxes, trying to find space where there was none. When I finally went downstairs, well into the afternoon, I found Diane sprawled on the living room sofa like a queen on her throne. She wore a bright pink jogging suit that had probably cost more than I earned in a week. Her nails were freshly done, her hair perfectly styled, and she had that expression of absolute satisfaction that turned my stomach. "Mary," Diane said without even sitting up, as if the effort of showing a minimum of respect was too much for her. "I need you to wash these towels before I use them. I don't trust hotel cleanliness." She pointed to a stack of perfectly folded white towels next to her suitcase. I stared at her, waiting for her to say something else. A greeting, perhaps, a thank you for having her, something to indicate that she acknowledged she was in my house, under my roof. But there was nothing, only that cold look and that order tossed into the air as if she were speaking to an employee. Stephen was in the kitchen preparing her something to eat. I heard him moving around, opening and closing cabinets, trying to please her. He didn't come to my defense. He didn't say a word. And in that moment, as I took those towels in my hands and headed for the laundry room, I felt something break inside me. But I also felt something else, something that had been dormant for too long, a spark of determination. Because while I was folding those towels, while I listened to Diane's laughter from the living room, while I watched my son become a stranger before my eyes, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this continue. Not like this. Not in the house I had built with my own hands. I didn't know how yet, but I was going to reclaim my place. I was going to reclaim my dignity. And I was going to make sure both Stephen and Diane understood exactly who I was and what I had sacrificed for this family. Because they thought they had me cornered. They thought I was an older woman, weak, without options. But I was holding secrets, secrets that would soon come to light. And when that happened, everything was going to change. The first few days with Diane in the house were a nightmare that seemed to have no end. Every morning I woke up with a knot in my stomach, knowing I would have to face her demands, her looks of contempt, that way she had of treating me as if I were invisible, or worse, as if I were her personal maid. On the third day, she came into the kitchen while I was preparing breakfast. It was barely 6:30 in the morning, but I had already been awake for an hour, unable to sleep in that small, dark room where they had now confined me. I was making coffee when I heard her behind me, dragging her slippers across the tile floor. "That coffee smells horrible," she said without even greeting me good morning. "I drink imported organic coffee. Stephen knows where to buy it. I expect you to only make that starting tomorrow." She crossed her arms and looked me up and down with that expression that was already so familiar to me, that mixture of boredom and disdain she used as if it were her natural state. I nodded silently, without turning to look at her, focused on pouring the coffee into my mug. But she wasn't finished. "And another thing," she continued, approaching the table where I had set out bread and jam. "I don't like this kind of bread. It's too common. I need whole grain, gluten-free bread, the kind they sell at the French bakery downtown. Also bring me Greek yogurt and organic fruits. Oh, and when you go to the grocery store, make sure to buy chemical-free cleaning products. My skin is very sensitive." Every word was an order, every sentence a demand, and I, like an idiot, just nodded, holding in the rage that burned in my chest. Stephen came down minutes later, already dressed for work. He kissed Diane on the forehead. He asked her if she had slept well, if she needed anything. He didn't even look at me. "Mom," he finally said, as if he had just noticed my presence, "Diane is going to give you a list of things she needs. Please make sure to get everything today." And without waiting for a reply, he grabbed his keys and walked out the door, leaving me alone with her. Diane smiled. It was a small, almost imperceptible smile, but it was loaded with victory. She sat down at the table, held out her phone toward me, and waited for me to approach to see the list she had prepared. When I looked at the screen, I felt the blood rush to my face. There were at least 30 items, each one more expensive and specific than the last. Face creams that cost $200, professional salon shampoo, imported vitamin supplements, scented candles from a French brand I didn't even know existed. "Any problem?" she asked with that sweet, poisonous voice she used when she wanted to provoke me. "No," I replied, lowering my gaze. "No problem." "Perfect. Oh, and Mary," she added as she got up from the table, stretching like a satisfied cat. "I need my room to be spotless when I get back from my yoga class. Vacuum well under the bed, and don't forget to clean the window frames. Dust gives me allergies." My room. That's what she called it. The room that had been mine, where I had spent so many nights reading, where I had comforted Stephen when he was a child and had nightmares, where I had dreamed of the future. Now it was her room, and I was in charge of keeping it clean. I left the house with the list in my hand and a broken heart. As I walked toward the grocery store, because I didn't even have money for the bus anymore after all the expenses Diane had imposed on me, I felt tears rolling down my cheeks. I quickly wiped them away, ashamed of my own weakness. I was 61 years old. I had survived so many things in my life. I wasn't going to let this woman break me. But the truth was, I felt broken. I felt small. I felt like everything I had worked for, everything I had fought for, was crumbling before my eyes, and I couldn't do anything to stop it. That afternoon, as I was putting away the groceries in the kitchen, the doorbell rang. It was Donna, my neighbor, the only friend I had left in this neighborhood that I no longer recognized as my own. Donna was my age, a warm and straightforward woman who always told it like it was. "Mary, honey, you look terrible," she said as soon as she saw me. "What's going on?" I tried to smile, to pretend that everything was fine, but my face must have betrayed me because Donna walked in without waiting for an invitation, closed the door behind her, and took my hands with a strength I didn't expect. "Tell me," she demanded with that firm voice that allowed no refusal. "And don't tell me it's nothing because I've known you for 15 years and I've never seen you like this." And then, right there in the entryway of my own house, I broke down. I told her everything. The picture from the airport, the message, how Stephen had emptied my room without even asking me, how Diane treated me like her employee, how I had been relegated to the back room, how every day I felt more invisible, more insignificant, more lost in the house that I myself had bought. Donna listened in silence, but I watched her expression harden with every word I spoke. When I finished, she squeezed my hand hard and looked me straight in the eye. "Mary, is this house in your name or Stephen's?" she asked directly. I lowered my gaze, ashamed. "Stephen's. I put it in his name 10 years ago when he turned 25. I wanted him to have something secure, something that was his. I thought he would never disrespect me like this. I thought he would always remember who paid for this." Donna sighed deeply. "And do you have proof that you bought it? Receipts? Bank transfers? Something?" I nodded slowly. "I have everything saved. All the mortgage payment stubs, all the receipts for the renovations. It's all in a box in the back room." I had been meticulous with my papers all my life, a habit I had inherited from my mother, who always said that documents were the only thing they couldn't take from you if you kept them safe. "Then listen to me carefully," Donna said, with an intensity that surprised me. "Don't give up. Not yet. The house may be in Stephen's name, but you have rights. And more important than that, you have dignity. Don't let that woman take it from you." I wanted to reply. I wanted to tell her she was right. But just then, I heard footsteps on the floor above. Diane was back from her yoga class. Donna squeezed my hand one last time before she left, but before walking out, she whispered something in my ear that was branded into my memory like fire. "Observe, listen, and when the time comes, act." That night, as I was doing the dishes after dinner, a dinner Diane had barely touched because she said the food was too seasoned, I heard voices coming from the living room. Stephen and Diane were arguing, or rather, Diane was talking, and Stephen was listening as always. I moved closer slowly, staying hidden behind the hallway wall, and paid attention. What I heard chilled my blood more than anything that had happened until then. "Stephen, I need to talk about your mother," Diane said with that voice she used when she wanted to sound reasonable, but which I had already learned to recognize as pure poison disguised as concern. "I can't keep living like this. She's here all the time, getting into our business, making noise, taking up space. We need privacy." I was frozen behind the wall, holding my breath, waiting to hear my son's reply, hoping he would defend me, that he would say something, anything, to show that he still saw me as his mother and not as a hindrance. "Honey, she lives here," Stephen replied, but his voice sounded tired, weak, as if he already knew he was going to lose this battle. "She's my mom. I can't just kick her out." "I'm not asking you to kick her out," Diane said, and I could imagine her expression, that innocent little face she made when she wanted to manipulate him. "I'm just asking you to think about solutions. There are really nice assisted living places for people her age, places where she'd be better cared for, where she'd have activities, where she'd make friends. Don't you think that would be better for her, too?" Assisted living, nursing homes. That's what she was suggesting. Getting rid of me like I was old furniture that no longer fit the decor. "Diane, she's only 61 years old," Stephen tried to argue. "She's not old enough to need a home. Plus, With what money? Those places are really expensive." There was a silence, a long, heavy silence that made me dread what would come next. And then Diane spoke, and her words were like knives plunging into my back. "Well, if we can't send her to a home, at least we should charge her rent. I mean, this is our house now. She takes up space, uses water, uses electricity. It's not fair that everything comes out of our pocket." Our pocket. Our house. As if she had paid a single cent, as if she had worked even one day in her life to contribute to anything. "I don't know, honey," Stephen said. And I could feel him being won over, how every word of hers was tearing down his defenses one by one. "It feels too harsh to charge my own mother." "Stephen," Diane's voice became firmer, more demanding. "We're having a baby. Did you forget? We need to start thinking about our future, about our family. Your mother has lived her life. Now it's our turn to live ours." I felt the floor open up beneath my feet. A baby. Diane was pregnant, and she was using my future grandchild, as a tool to kick me out of my own house. I couldn't listen anymore. I walked away silently, returned to the kitchen with my legs trembling, and finished doing the dishes with numb hands. When I went up to my little room that night, I sat on the edge of the bed and cried until I had no tears left. But among the tears, something began to grow inside me, something stronger than the pain. It was rage. It was determination. It was the absolute certainty that I wasn't going to let them destroy me without a fight. The next morning, while Diane slept late as always, and Stephen had gone to work, I began my investigation. I looked for the box where I kept all my important documents. It was buried under other boxes in the little room, covered in dust, but there it was. I opened it with trembling hands and began to go through the contents. There were all the mortgage payment stubs, 30 years of monthly payments, each with my name, my signature, the bank stamp. There were the invoices for all the renovations I had done over the years, the new roof that had cost $8,000, the kitchen I had remodeled for $12,000, the master bathroom, the garden, the fence, everything paid for by me, everything documented. And then I found something I had completely forgotten, a notarized document dated the day I put the house in Stephen's name. It was a letter my lawyer at the time had me sign, a kind of legal protection where I declared that although the property passed to my son's name, I retained the right of lifetime residency, that I could never be evicted from this house as long as I lived. My hands were shaking as I read and reread that document. How could I have forgotten it? It had been so long ago, and I had trusted Stephen so much that I never thought the day would come when I would need to use it. But that day had come. I put the document in a safe, different place where I knew no one else would find it. And then I continued going through the rest of the papers. I needed to understand exactly what rights I had, what power I still held. That afternoon, when Donna came to visit again, I showed her everything. Her eyes lit up when she saw the notarized document. "Mary, this changes everything," she said excitedly. "You need to talk to a lawyer. You need to fully understand your rights before you take any step. Do you know one?" I thought for a moment. There was a lawyer at the firm where I used to clean years ago, a man named Ernest. He had always been kind to me. He spoke to me with respect when others treated me as invisible. I had helped him once when he had a problem with his elderly mother. I had given him some advice on how to care for her better. He had always told me that if I ever needed legal help, I shouldn't hesitate to look him up. "Yes," I told Donna. "I know someone. I'll go see him tomorrow." But before I could do anything, I needed more information. I needed to understand what was really going on with Diane. Why did something not add up? That urgency to move in with us, that insistence on staying for good, that way of wanting to displace me so quickly. It wasn't just malice. There was something else. That night, while Diane was showering, I took advantage of the fact that she had left her purse in the living room. I know it's wrong to look through other people's things. I know. But I had nothing left to lose. I approached the purse with my heart pounding like a drum and with trembling hands began to search through its contents. At first I found nothing out of the ordinary. Expensive makeup, her wallet with credit cards that gleamed under the light, her phone. But then, in a side pocket, I found a crumpled envelope. I took it out slowly and looked inside. They were letters, collection letters. from different credit card companies. The amounts took my breath away. $15,000 on one card, $20,000 on another, $32,000 on a third, all past due, all with threats of lawsuit, all addressed to Diane. But that wasn't all. There was another document, this one more official, with a law firm's letterhead. It was an eviction notice. Diane had to vacate her apartment before the 30th of this month for non-payment. That was in less than a week. Everything began to make sense. The sudden move, the urgency, the for good. Diane hadn't come out of love or a desire to be closer to her husband. She had come because she had nowhere else to go. She was running from her debts, and she had turned my house into her refuge, me into her maid, and my son into her economic lifeline. I heard the shower water shut off. I quickly put everything back in the envelope, placed it exactly where I had found it, and backed away from the purse as if it burned me. My heart was beating so fast I thought Diane would hear it from the bathroom. I went up to my little room and sat on the bed, processing what I had just discovered. Diane was ruined, completely ruined. And now I understood why she was so desperate to stay here, to displace me, to make sure this house was hers. But what she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I also had my cards, and I was about to start playing them. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon when I was already dressed and ready to go out. I had slept little, turning everything I had discovered over in my head, planning every step I would take. For the first time in weeks, I felt something different from pain and humiliation. I felt purpose. I left a note in the kitchen saying I had gone out to run some errands. I didn't specify which ones. I didn't care if Diane was annoyed about not having her breakfast served at the exact time she expected. Today, my needs were more important than her whims. The law firm where Ernest worked was downtown. I took 2 buses to get there, saving the taxi money. As I traveled, I looked out the window at the streets I had traveled so many times when I worked cleaning offices. How many early mornings had I spent on those buses, with my hands rough from all the detergent, with my body aching, but with a heart full of hope because every dollar I earned brought me closer to owning my own home? A home they were now taking from me piece by piece. When I arrived at the firm, the receptionist looked at me with that expression I knew so well, that look that evaluates you in 2 seconds and decides you're not important enough. I was wearing my most presentable clothes, a gray suit that had been elegant 10 years ago but was now frayed at the seams. My shoes were clean but old, my purse was imitation leather, and it showed. "How can I help you?" she asked with a professional but cold smile. "I need to speak with Mr. Ernest," I said, trying to keep my voice firm. "My name is Mary. He knows me. I worked here years ago on the cleaning staff." The receptionist raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Ernest is very busy. Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's urgent." "Please tell him I'm here. He will see me." I could see the doubt on her face, but she finally picked up the phone and dialed an extension. She spoke in a low voice, mentioning my name, and then her expression changed to one of surprise. She hung up and looked at me with a little more respect. "The lawyer says to come up. 3rd floor, office 305. I climbed the stairs because the elevator was occupied, and I was too anxious to wait. When I knocked on the door of office 305, I heard Ernest's warm voice inviting me in. He rose from his desk as soon as he saw me. Ernest was about 50, with gray hair at the temples, and those kind eyes that made you feel like he really cared. He looked older than the last time I had seen him, but his smile was still the same. "Mary, how long has it been?" he said, extending his hand, and then, to my surprise, giving me a fatherly hug. "Please sit down. How have you been? How is your son?" And there, in that office overlooking the city, surrounded by law books and diplomas on the walls, I broke down. I told him everything, from the picture at the airport to the back room, from the daily humiliations to the discovery of Diane's debts, from the conversation I had overheard about sending me to a home to the notarized document I had found among my papers. Ernest listened in silence, taking notes occasionally, nodding gravely. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and clasped his hands under his chin, thoughtfully. "Mary, you have more power than you think," he finally said. That notarized document you found is pure gold. It's a right of lifetime residency. That means that legally no one can force you out of that house as long as you live. Not your son, not his wife, not anyone. The house may be in Stephen's name, but you have a real right to it. I felt an enormous weight lift from my chest. So they can't kick me out. They can't. And if they try to, they would be violating your rights and you could sue them. But there's more, he continued, leaning forward. If you paid all the mortgages, all the improvements, and you have proof of that, you could even claim a part of the property. We could argue that the transfer of title to your son was an act of family trust, not a complete donation of your financial rights to the property. My mind worked at full speed, processing every word. What exactly does that mean? It means you could be recognized as a co-owner, or at least have significant financial compensation if your son decided to sell the house. But Mary, he paused, looking me directly in the eyes, I need you to understand something. If we go down this road, things with your son are going to get difficult. There's going to be tension. There's going to be conflict. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Stephen. About the child he had been, sweet and loving, who hugged me and told me I was the best mom in the world. I thought about all the nights I had spent awake when he had a fever, all the sacrifices I had made to give him a good education, a good life. And then I thought about the man he had become, the one who had taken me out of my room without a second thought, the one who allowed his wife to treat me like garbage. I'm prepared, I said, with a firmness that surprised myself. Ernest smiled. Good. Then this is what we're going to do. First, I need you to bring me all those documents you mentioned. The payment stubs, the invoices, the notarized document, everything. I'm going to review every piece of paper and build a solid case. In the meantime, I want you to do something for me. What is it? I want you to document everything. Every instance of abuse, every humiliation, every order they give you treating you like an employee. Write down dates, times, witnesses if there are any. If your neighbor Donna has seen anything, get her willing to testify. And if you can, record conversations. Not necessarily to use in court, but to have proof of how they are treating you in your own house. The idea made me nervous. Is it illegal to record without them knowing? In your own home, documenting abuse towards you, it's legal. But don't worry about that now. Just make sure you have evidence of what's happening. And Mary, he added seriously, don't tell them anything yet, neither your son nor his wife. The less they know about what you're planning, the better. I nodded, feeling the adrenaline starting to rush through my veins. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone who was taking control of her life. How much is all this going to cost me? I asked, dreading the answer. Lawyers were expensive, and I barely had some savings tucked away. Ernest shook his head. Mary, do you remember when my mother got sick years ago? You stayed extra hours without charging me, helping me take care of her when I had to work late. You taught me how to give her her medicine, how to make her feel comfortable. I could never pay you enough for that kindness. This is the least I can do for you. Tears returned to my eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just promise me you're going to be strong, that you're not going to let them break you, and that when it's time to face them, you're going to stand firm on your rights. I promise, I said, and this time my voice didn't tremble. I left the firm with a completely different feeling than I had had walking in. I had a plan, I had an ally, and most importantly, I had hope. On the way back, I stopped at an electronics store. With part of my last savings, I bought a small recorder, the kind that can be easily hidden. The clerk showed me how to use it, how to activate it with just the press of a button. It was so small it fit in the pocket of my apron. When I got home, it was mid-afternoon. Diane was in the living room, watching television and eating imported chocolates that had probably cost Stephen $50. She looked at me with disgust when I walked in. Where were you? Your note didn't say anything specific. I needed you to go to the grocery store this morning and you weren't here. She scolded me as if she had the right to control every minute of my time. I had to run some personal errands, I replied calmly, putting away my purse. Personal errands, she repeated sarcastically. What errands could a woman like you possibly have? I bit my tongue to keep from answering. Instead, I smiled slightly and headed for the kitchen. But before leaving the living room, I discreetly activated the recorder in my pocket. Every word Diane said from now on would be recorded. "Mary, come here," she called me with that imperious tone she always used. I turned around and found her pointing to the coffee table. "Clean this up. There are crumbs everywhere and the mess bothers me." "Of course," I said in a neutral voice, and proceeded to clean up the crumbs from her chocolates while she continued watching her show as if I were part of the furniture. The following days were a test of patience and determination. I followed Ernest's instructions to the letter. Every morning after Stephen left for work and before Diane woke up, I wrote down everything that had happened the day before in a notebook. The times, the orders, the humiliations. I documented every impossible grocery list, every absurd demand, every time I was treated as if I didn't matter. And I recorded. I recorded the conversations where Diane told her friends on the phone how she had solved her housing problem by moving in with her silly mother-in-law, who did everything she was asked. I recorded when she told Stephen that they needed to start charging me rent because it was time for his mother to contribute financially. I recorded her cruel laughter when she spoke of me with contempt, thinking I couldn't hear her. Donna became my silent accomplice. She came to visit me regularly and witnessed many of the situations. One afternoon, Diane ordered her to leave because this isn't your house and Mary has work to do. Donna left, but not without making a mental note of everything for the testimony she would eventually give. A week after my visit to the firm, Stephen came home earlier than usual. He seemed agitated, nervous. Diane ran to greet him at the door, but he barely acknowledged her. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when I heard his voice calling me. "Mom, I need to talk to you." My heart jumped. Could he have found out about my visit to Ernest? Could someone have seen me? I dried my hands on the apron and went out to the living room where he was waiting. Diane was next to him, with that expression I couldn't decipher between concern and satisfaction. "Sit down, please," Stephen said, pointing to the sofa. I sat on the edge, with my back straight, preparing for what was coming. "Mom, Diane and I have been talking about our situation," he began, without looking me in the eyes. "As you know, we're having a baby, and that means we need to make some changes to the house." I nodded silently, waiting. The recorder in my pocket was on. "The guest room, where Diane is now, we're going to turn into the baby's room," he continued, and I could see Diane squeeze his hand in support. "And we need the room next to it, the one overlooking the garden, as a playroom. So we've thought it would be better if you moved to a more appropriate place for you." "A more appropriate place," I repeated, keeping my voice calm even though my blood was boiling inside. "Yes," Diane intervened with that fake smile that was already so familiar to me. "We've been looking at some assisted living facilities. There's one in particular that is very nice. It has activities, 24-hour nurses, food included. It would be perfect for someone your age." "I am 61 years old," I said firmly. "I am not an invalid who needs 24-hour care." "No, of course not," Stephen hurried to say, although his voice sounded unconvincing. "But Mom, you have to understand. We're a young family now. We need our space. And you also deserve to be in a place where you have people your age, where you don't have to worry about cooking or cleaning." "This is my house," I said, and for the first time in weeks, I let my voice show some of the anger I had been holding back. "I bought this house. I paid every cent of the mortgage for 30 years. "Technically, the house is in my name," Stephen replied, and those words were like a dagger in my heart. "You yourself put it in my name 10 years ago. Legally, it's mine." Diane smiled. A small, almost imperceptible smile, but it was there, a smile of victory. "And on that note," Stephen continued, pulling some papers out of his briefcase, "we also need to talk about money. Diane is right that if you're going to stay here until we find a suitable residence, it would only be fair for you to contribute to the expenses. We've calculated that $500 a month would be reasonable for the room and utilities. $500, almost my entire monthly Social Security check. I would be left with nothing for my own expenses, for my medicines, for any emergency." "I don't have $500 to give you every month," I said, although it was a lie. I had some savings hidden, but I wasn't going to give them to them. "Then you'll have to find a way," Diane said harshly, "or accept our offer of the residence. In fact, Stephen and I have decided it would be better if you moved out before next month. We need to start preparing the rooms for the baby." I stared at both of them. At my son, who avoided my gaze. At my daughter-in-law, who looked at me with those cold eyes full of contempt. And in that moment, I made a decision. "I need time to think," I finally said, getting up from the couch. "It's a very big decision." "You have 1 week," Diane replied before Stephen could say anything. "1 week to decide if you pay rent or leave. We can't wait any longer than that." I went up to my little room with my legs shaking. Once inside, with the door closed, I took out the recorder and stopped the recording. Every word had been registered, every threat, every attempt at extortion, every proof that they were treating me like garbage in my own house. That night, I called Ernest from a public phone because I didn't trust that Diane wasn't checking my cell phone. I told him what had happened and emailed him the recordings I had made from an internet cafe. "Perfect," he said. "This is exactly what we needed. But Mary, now comes the hard part. We need to act fast. They've given you a week, but we're going to get ahead of them. Are you ready to take the next step?" "I'm ready," I replied without hesitation. "Good. Then this is what we're going to do. I'm going to prepare all the legal documents, a formal requirement establishing your rights to the property, a cease and desist order for harassment, and if necessary, a lawsuit for wrongful eviction and emotional abuse. But before filing anything officially, I want you to gather all your important belongings, documents, jewelry if you have any, photos, anything of sentimental value. Put them in a safe place, maybe with your friend Donna." "Why? Do you think they'll do something?" "I don't know, but when people feel cornered, they can react in unpredictable ways. Better safe than sorry." For the next few days, I continued to act as if nothing had happened. I continued cooking, cleaning, obeying orders. But at night, little by little, I took my most valuable things out of the house. The photos from my childhood, the important documents, the few pieces of jewelry I owned, the money I had hidden. I took everything to Donna's house in small amounts so no one would notice. Diane was getting more and more unbearable. She had started having morning sickness from the pregnancy, and that made her mood even worse. She blamed me for everything. If the food smelled too strong, it was my fault. If there was noise, it was my fault. If Stephen came home tired from work, it was also my fault for creating tension in the house. One afternoon, 3 days before the week ultimatum was up, an unexpected visitor arrived. She was an elegant woman, about 40 years old, dressed in a beige business suit. She knocked on the door, and when I opened it, she asked for Diane. "Who's asking for her?" I said, suspicious. "I'm Leticia Morales. I represent the law firm of Hernandez and Associates. I have legal documents to deliver to Mrs. Diane Reyes." Diane had heard from upstairs and came down quickly, but when she saw the woman, her face went completely pale. "You can't be here," she said in a shaky voice. "I haven't received any notification." "Well, you are now," Leticia said, handing her an envelope. "It's a lawsuit for $37,000 in unpaid credit card debt, plus interest and legal fees. You have 30 days to respond." Diane took the envelope with trembling hands. Her face had gone from white to bright red in a matter of seconds. Leticia didn't wait for a reply. She simply nodded professionally and left, leaving Diane standing in the middle of the living room with that paper that seemed to burn her hands. I watched from the kitchen, pretending to be busy cleaning the stove, but not missing any detail of the scene. Diane ripped open the envelope desperately, read the contents, and her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness but of pure panic. It was the look of someone whose castle of lies had just begun to crumble. She sank onto the couch, with the papers scattered around her. For a moment, the arrogant, cruel woman who had invaded my house disappeared, replaced by someone who seemed much younger and more frightened. But I didn't feel sorry. I remembered every humiliation, every order, every look of contempt. I remembered how she had tried to steal my house and my dignity. When Stephen came home that afternoon, Diane threw herself into his arms, crying. I was setting the table for dinner, moving silently like a ghost, but listening to every word. "Stephen, we have a problem," Diane sobbed. "A really big problem. I need you to help me. I need money. A lot of money." "What happened? Is it the baby? Are you okay?" Stephen held her, genuinely worried. "It's not the baby. It's my credit cards. They're suing me. It's $37,000. If I don't pay, they're going to garnish my accounts. They're going to completely ruin my credit. Stephen, please, you have to help me." I watched Stephen's expression change from concern to confusion, and then to something resembling anger. $37,000? How did you accumulate that amount? What did you spend all that money on? Diane dried her tears, searching for the right words. "It was things for the house, clothes, trips. You know how it is. Things add up. I thought I could pay it off little by little, but the interest grew, and now it's out of control." "And why did you never tell me anything?" Stephen's voice sounded hurt, betrayed. "Because I was afraid you'd be angry. Because I didn't want to worry you. Stephen, please, we have to find a solution. We could take out a loan using this house as collateral. The bank would give us the money, no problem." And there it was. The real reason Diane had been so anxious to keep the house, to displace me, to make sure I wasn't in the way. She didn't just need a place to live without paying rent. She needed an asset she could use as collateral to pay off her debts. Stephen ran his hands through his hair, clearly overwhelmed. "I don't know, Diane. That's a lot of money, and putting the house up as collateral is very risky. If something goes wrong, we could lose everything." "Nothing is going to go wrong," she insisted, regaining some of her usual manipulative tone. "I can get a job, pay off the loan little by little. But I need you to help me now. We're a family. We're having a baby. We can't let this destroy us." From my position in the kitchen, I could see Stephen giving in. He always gave in to her. It was his greatest weakness. "Okay," he finally said, his voice tired. "Tomorrow I'll go to the bank to ask about loans. But Diane, this has to stop. No more unnecessary expenses. No more credit cards." "Understood." She nodded vigorously, hugging him tightly, whispering thank you over and over. But I saw her expression over Stephen's shoulder. There was no real gratitude there, just relief at having gotten what she wanted once again. That night, after they both went upstairs to sleep, I called Ernest from Donna's phone. I told him what had happened, the lawsuit, the conversation about the loan using the house as collateral. "This is perfect, Mary," Ernest said, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "They are about to make a huge legal mistake. If they try to use the house as collateral without your consent, considering you have residency rights to the property, that could be annulled. And we have all the evidence that Diane is lying about her finances and manipulating your son to save her own skin. What do we do now? Tomorrow I'm filing the documents in court. A formal requirement establishing your rights to the property and a restraining order prohibiting them from making any legal transaction using the house without your consent. I'm also going to send a letter to Stephen informing him of the real legal situation. It's better he knows before he makes a mistake that could ruin him financially. What if they get angry? And what if they try to kick me out immediately? That's why we're going to act fast, first thing tomorrow. And Mary, I need you to be prepared. When they receive these documents, there's going to be an explosion. It's going to be ugly, but you have to stand firm." All right, I replied, although my voice sounded much more confident than I actually felt. The next morning, Stephen left early for the bank. Diane stayed home, nervous, pacing back and forth in the living room, biting her nails. I prepared breakfast as usual, moving silently through the kitchen, waiting. At 10 o'clock in the morning, a messenger arrived. He brought 2 envelopes, one addressed to Stephen and one to Diane. She signed the receipt with trembling hands, clearly fearing they were more debt demands. But when she opened her envelope and began to read, her expression changed from fear to disbelief, and then to pure fury. "What is this?" she shouted, turning toward me. I was by the sink, drying dishes. "You did this." I turned around slowly, with all the calmness I could muster. "Did what?" "This." She threw the papers at me. "A court order saying you have rights to this house, that we can't sell it or use it as collateral without your permission. How dare you?" "This is my house," I said in a firm voice. "I bought it, I paid for it, and I have documents that prove it." Diane approached me with eyes full of hatred. You're a viper, an old, bitter viper who can't stand to see her son happy. You did all this to ruin us." "I didn't ruin anything," I replied, holding my ground. "You tried to steal my house. You tried to get me out of here as if I were worthless. You tried to use my property to pay your debts that my son didn't even know existed. Stephen is going to be furious with you." She spat the words with venom. "When he finds out about this, he's going to kick you out of here. I don't care what your papers say. You're going to regret messing with us." "I don't think so," I said, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. A small but genuine smile. "Because Stephen is going to find out about a lot of things today, and something tells me you're the one who is going to regret it." As if my words had summoned him, we heard the front door open. Stephen was back, and by the sound of his hurried footsteps, he wasn't bringing good news. He entered the living room with a distraught face, holding his own envelope of legal documents. "Can someone explain to me what the hell is going on?" he shouted. "I went to the bank and they told me they can't give me the loan because there's a court order on the property, an order my own mother filed." He turned to me, and for the first time in months, he truly saw me. Not as furniture, not as a hindrance, but as a person. And in his eyes I saw confusion, pain, and something that looked like the beginning of understanding. "Stephen," I said calmly, "we need to talk, all three of us, and we need to talk with the truth, all of it." Diane tried to interrupt, but Stephen raised his hand to stop her. "No, Mom is right. Sit down, both of you, and someone better start explaining to me what's really going on here." And so, in the living room of my own house, with the legal documents scattered on the coffee table like cards in a game that was about to end, the conversation that would change everything began. I took a deep breath before starting. This was the moment I had been waiting for and dreading at the same time. The moment when all the truth would come to light, for better or for worse. Stephen had sat down on the sofa, his body tense and his jaw clenched. Diane was standing next to him, her arms crossed, and that look that promised revenge. "Stephen," I began, keeping my voice firm even though my heart was pounding, "I bought this house 32 years ago. I worked cleaning offices, houses, hospitals. I worked double shifts for years to pay the mortgage. Every cent came from my hands. You were just a child when we started living here." "I know, Mom," Stephen said impatiently, "but you yourself put the house in my name 10 years ago. You gave it to me. I remember that perfectly." "I put it in your name because you were my only son, and I wanted to ensure your future. But what you didn't remember, or what I never fully explained, is that when I made that transfer, my lawyer included a clause for the right of lifetime residency. That means that even though the house is in your name, I have the legal right to live here until the day I die. No one can force me out. No one." I took a copy of the notarized document from my pocket and handed it to him. Stephen took it with trembling hands and began to read. I saw his eyes scan the lines, how his expression went from anger to surprise, and then to something that looked like shame. "I didn't know this," he murmured, still looking at the paper. "You didn't know a lot of things," I continued. "You didn't know that your wife has $37,000 in credit card debt. You didn't know that she was evicted from her apartment for non-payment. You didn't know that the real reason she came to live here for good wasn't out of love or a desire to be near you, but because she was running from her financial problems." "That's a lie!" Diane shouted, but her voice sounded desperate, not convincing. "She's making things up to separate us." "It's a lie?" I said, taking out my phone and looking for the photos I had taken of the collection documents I found in her purse. "Explain these letters to Stephen then. Explain the eviction notice. Explain why 3 different credit card companies are suing you." I showed the phone to Stephen. I watched his face fall as he looked at the images, the dates, the amounts, the irrefutable evidence that his wife had been lying to him all this time. "Diane," his voice was barely a whisper, "this is real." Diane sank onto the sofa, her hands covering her face. Her shoulders trembled, but I had already learned to recognize her manipulative tears. This time Stephen also seemed less convinced. "Stephen, honey, I can explain," she said through sobs. "Yes, I had some money problems, but I was going to tell you. I just needed the right moment. And yes, I lost my apartment, but that was the landlord's fault. He hated me. This is all a misunderstanding. A $37,000 misunderstanding? Stephen's voice rose. A misunderstanding that almost made me put my house up as collateral for a loan we probably never would have been able to pay? A misunderstanding that could have left us on the street. I was going to pay it. I had a plan, Diane insisted, but her words sounded hollow even to herself. What plan? I asked, unable to contain myself. Was your plan to live here without paying anything, treating me like your maid, while you waited for Stephen to sacrifice everything he has to save your skin? That was your plan. You have no right to speak. Diane turned to me with renewed fury. You went through my things. You invaded my privacy. That's illegal. What's illegal is trying to defraud my son, I replied without backing down. What's illegal is harassment and emotional abuse, which is exactly what you've been doing to me since you got here. Emotional abuse, Diane scoffed. Please. I was just asking you to help with the house. It's not my fault you're so sensitive. Help with the house. I pulled out my notebook where I had been documenting everything. On the 12th of this month, you ordered me to hand wash your underwear because you don't trust the washing machine. On the 14th, you yelled at me in front of Donna because the coffee wasn't hot enough. On the 16th, you told me I was a useless burden and that it would be better if I went to a nursing home. On the 18th, you forbade me from using the living room because it is the royal family's space. Do you want me to continue? Stephen stared at me with wide eyes. All of that is true, every word, I replied, and I have more. I have recordings. Recordings? Stephen repeated, incredulous. I took the small recorder out of my pocket and pressed play. Diane's voice filled the room, clear and cruel. A woman like you has no reason to have important errands. I switched to another recording. Stephen and I have decided it would be better if you moved out before next month. And another one. We need to start charging her rent. It's not fair that everything comes out of our pocket. With each recording, I saw Stephen sink deeper into the sofa. How the reality of what had been happening in his own house, under his own roof, finally hit him like a devastating blow. And you allowed it? I dared to ask him. You heard even one of these conversations, and you didn't do anything. Stephen covered his face with his hands. When he spoke, his voice sounded broken. I didn't know it was that bad. Diane told me you were having a hard time adjusting to living with us, that you were difficult sometimes. I thought they were just normal squabbles between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. I never imagined it was like this. You never imagined. My voice cracked for the first time. Stephen, I'm your mother. I raised you alone. I sacrificed everything for you. And it didn't seem strange to you that they moved me to the smallest room in the house? It didn't seem strange to you that suddenly I was always serving, always obeying, always silent? Tears finally rolled down my cheeks, but these were different from all the others I had shed in recent weeks. These weren't tears of humiliation or fear. They were tears of liberation, of truth coming to light after being buried for so long. Mom, Stephen got up from the sofa, approaching me, but Diane stopped him by grabbing his arm. Don't let her manipulate you, she told him urgently. She's exaggerating everything. She's trying to separate us because she can't stand to see us happy together. It's typical of toxic mothers-in-law. She probably faked those recordings. It's obvious she's lying about everything. Lying? A new voice interrupted from the living room entrance. It was Donna, who had come in without knocking, as I had asked her to do if she saw things getting out of control. I've seen everything. Every humiliation, every cruel order, every tear Mary has cried because of you two. And I'm willing to testify under oath about everything I've witnessed. Diane paled. She realized that her castle of lies was crumbling brick by brick, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Stephen, I said, with all the firmness I could muster, you have to make a decision right now. You have to decide if you're going to continue letting yourself be manipulated by a woman who has lied to you about everything, who almost made you lose your property, and who has turned your own mother into a slave in her own house. Or are you going to face reality and start doing the right thing? The silence that followed was deafening. Stephen looked at all of us. At me with my notebook of evidence and my recorder, at Donna with her firm expression as a witness, at Diane with her mask finally falling, revealing the panic underneath. And then, slowly, Stephen let go of Diane's grasp. "I think," he said in a shaky but clear voice, "that I need to hear the whole story. All of it. No interruptions, no excuses. And then I'm going to decide what to do." He turned to Diane with a look I had never seen from him before, a hard, disappointed look from someone who is finally opening their eyes after being blind for too long. "And Diane," he added, "you better start telling the truth. Because if I find out you've lied about anything else, if there is one more secret you haven't told me, this conversation is going to end very differently than you expect." Diane sank back onto the sofa, defeated. For the first time since I met her, I saw her without that mask of confidence and arrogance she always wore. It was like seeing an actress after the curtain falls, exhausted and vulnerable, without the character that protected her. "Okay," she finally said in a small voice. "I'll tell you everything. But Stephen, please, I need you to understand that I never wanted to hurt you. Everything I did was out of fear." Stephen crossed his arms, staying standing, keeping his distance. "Talk." Diane took a deep breath. "The debt started 3 years ago, before I met you. I had a well-paid job at a marketing company. I made good money and got used to a certain lifestyle. Trips, designer clothes, expensive restaurants. I thought I could always maintain it. But then I was laid off. The company went bankrupt overnight and I was left with nothing. No severance, no savings because I had spent them all, no backup plan." She paused, wiping away the tears that now seemed genuine. "I had to keep up appearances. I couldn't let anyone know I was ruined. So I started using the credit cards. For everything. For rent, for food, to keep dressing well for job interviews. I thought I would get another job quickly and could pay everything off. But the months passed, and nothing. The interest grew, the debts multiplied, and I kept lying. I kept pretending everything was fine." "And when did you meet me?" Stephen asked in a tense voice. "When I met you, I already owed $25,000, Diane admitted, lowering her gaze. "And yes, Stephen, part of the reason I got close to you was because you seemed stable. You had a good job, a house, a secure future. I thought if I married you, I could solve my problems little by little without you finding out. But things got worse. The creditors became more aggressive. They sued me. They evicted me. And when I saw the opportunity to move in here, I took it because I had no other option." "So everything was a lie," Stephen said, and the pain in his voice was palpable. "Our marriage, your feelings, everything was a strategy to save you from your debts." "No," Diane got up abruptly. "At first, maybe I thought that way, but Stephen, I swear I fell in love with you, truly, and the baby is real. It's yours. That's not a lie. But yes, I panicked when the lawsuits started coming. I needed to secure a place to live, secure resources, and your mom was here, taking up space, being an obstacle to my plans. So yes, I treated her badly. I treated her as if she didn't matter, because in my desperation, she didn't matter to me. I could only think about surviving." I stared at her, feeling a strange mixture of anger and something that could almost be compassion. Almost. Because even though I understood the fear that had led her to act that way, nothing justified the cruelty. Nothing justified turning another person into a disposable object to save your own skin. "And what about the plan to charge me rent?" I asked. "To send me to a home?" That was also out of fear. Diane looked at me directly for the first time with something akin to honesty. "It was out of desperation. If you left, Stephen wouldn't have to worry about you. He would have more money available to help me. And if you stayed, at least I wanted to get some money out of you. I know it was wrong, I know. But when you're drowning, you don't think about who you hurt while you're gasping for air." "You hurt my mother," Stephen said, his voice trembling with contained emotion. "The woman who gave me everything, who worked herself sick to give me a roof, an education, a future, and I let you treat her like trash. I was so blinded by you, so convinced that we were building our own family, that I didn't see what was happening right in front of my eyes." He turned to me, and I saw tears streaming down his face. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. There are not enough words to apologize. I failed as a son. I failed you in the worst possible way. And I don't know if you can ever forgive me." My heart broke seeing him like that. He was my son, my boy, the one I had rocked in my arms, the one I had comforted in his nightmares, the one I had raised alone with all the love I had. And yes, he had hurt me deeply. But I also knew that he had been manipulated, blinded by feelings that Diane had carefully cultivated. "Stephen," I said softly, "you are my son. You will always be my son. And even though you hurt me, even though you disappointed me, I also know you are not a bad person. You were weak. You let yourself be manipulated, but you can still correct this." "How?" he asked desperately. "How do I fix all the damage I caused?" "First," Donna intervened with her practical voice, "by recognizing that your mother has all the rights to this house that she says she has, by respecting those rights. Second, by setting clear boundaries with your wife. And third, by deciding what kind of man you want to be for your child when he is born." Diane tensed up hearing this. "What does that mean? Are they going to separate me from my husband? Are they going to destroy my family?" "You destroyed your own family with your lies," I told her firmly. "But that doesn't mean you can't rebuild some of it. Stephen will have to decide if he can trust you again, if he can forgive you, and you will have to decide if you are truly willing to change or if you are just going to continue manipulating everyone around you." Just then, the doorbell rang. Donna went to open it and came back with Ernest, my lawyer. He carried a briefcase and that serious expression professionals have when they arrive to close an important matter. "Good afternoon, everyone," he greeted formally. "I am Ernest Vargas, legal representative for Mrs. Mary. I understand a significant conversation has taken place here today." Stephen looked at him with a mixture of surprise and resignation. "That's right. My mother has shown us evidence of everything that has been happening, and my wife has admitted her lies." Ernest nodded. "Good. Then we can proceed in a civilized manner. I have documents here that need to be signed. The first is a formal acknowledgement by Stephen of his mother's right of lifetime residency on this property. The second is an agreement that no financial transaction can be carried out using this house as collateral without Mary's express and notarized consent. And the third is a commitment to cease harassment, which both Stephen and Diane must sign, where they commit to treating Mary with respect and dignity or face legal consequences. He placed the documents on the coffee table. The silence was so dense it could be felt physically. "And if we don't sign them?" Diane asked with one last flicker of defiance. "Then we will proceed with a full lawsuit," Ernest replied with professional calm. "For wrongful eviction, emotional abuse, attempted property fraud, and any other charge we can substantiate. Mrs. Mary has abundant evidence, witnesses, and the law on her side. You have lies and debts. Do you really want this to go to court?" Diane sank onto the sofa, completely defeated. Stephen looked at the documents, then looked at me. "I don't need to read them," he said. "I will sign everything. It's the least I can do. This house is yours, Mom. It always was. I was just a fool who forgot that." He took the pen Ernest offered him and began to sign each document. His signature trembled slightly, but it was firm. When he finished, he pushed the papers toward Diane. "Your turn," he said without looking at her. Diane took the pen with trembling hands. For a moment I thought she would refuse, that she would make one last dramatic attempt to reverse the situation. But finally, with tears streaming down her cheeks, she signed every page. Ernest collected the documents, reviewed them carefully, and nodded with satisfaction. "Perfect. These will be notarized and filed tomorrow morning. From this moment on, Mrs. Mary's rights are legally protected. Any violation of these agreements will result in immediate legal action." He turned to me with a warm smile. "Mary, your home is safe, your dignity is restored, and your son now understands exactly what the real situation is." I felt an enormous weight lift from my shoulders. After weeks of humiliation, of fear, of feeling invisible in my own house, I finally had back what was mine. Not just the house, my dignity, my voice, my power. "Thank you, Ernest," I said, my voice full of emotion. "Thank you for believing in me when I had almost stopped believing in myself." He squeezed my shoulder with fatherly affection. "You were always stronger than you thought, Mary. You just needed to remember it." After Ernest left with the signed documents, the house fell into a heavy silence. It was the kind of silence that comes after a storm, when everything has been said, when all the masks have fallen, when the truth has finally taken its place in the center of the room without being able to be ignored. Stephen stood by the window, looking out at the street without really seeing anything. Diane remained on the sofa, her arms wrapped around her body as if trying to protect herself from something invisible. And I, after so many weeks of feeling small in my own house, finally breathed freely. Donna squeezed my hand before leaving. "I'll be at my house if you need me," she whispered, and I saw in her eyes the pride she felt for me. When she closed the door, the three of us were left alone to face what would come next. "Mom," Stephen finally broke the silence. He turned to me, and I could see he had aged years in these few hours. "I know I'm sorry is not enough. I know there are no words that can erase what I put you through, but I need you to know that nothing like this will ever, ever happen again." He walked toward me and knelt in front of where I was sitting. The gesture surprised me so much that tears returned to my eyes. "I lost sight of who you are. I forgot all the sacrifices you made for me. I became someone I don't even recognize myself. But I want to change that. I want to be the son you deserve, the man you raised." I cupped his face in my hands, as I did when he was a child and needed comforting. "Stephen, you made mistakes, big, painful mistakes, but you also had the courage to recognize them when you saw the truth. Not everyone can do that. Your father never could." He closed his eyes, letting the tears flow freely. "How do I start fixing this?" "You start by staying here with me, rebuilding what was broken," I said firmly. "This is your home as much as it is mine, but now we both know that it is also my house and that I deserve respect under this roof, respect that will never be negotiable again." I turned to Diane, who was watching us with an unreadable expression. "And you," I told her directly, "have decisions to make. You can continue to be the person you were these last few weeks, manipulative and cruel, or you can choose to truly change, to learn what it means to be part of a family where everyone matters, not just you." Diane wiped her tears with the back of her hand. When she spoke, her voice was different, smaller, more real. "I don't know how to be different. All my life I've had to fight for everything. I never had a family that cared for me like you cared for Stephen. I learned to survive by using people before they used me. But you're right. I can't raise a child like this. I can't build a real life on lies." She got up from the sofa slowly and approached where I was. For a moment, I thought she was going to say something cruel, a last attempt to maintain control. But instead, she knelt next to Stephen. "Mary," she said, and it was the first time she had used my name with something akin to respect. "I don't expect you to forgive me, not after everything I did. But I ask you for a chance to show you that I can be better, that I can learn to be part of this family the right way. I'm not asking you to trust me immediately. I just ask for time to prove to you that I can change." I looked at her for a long moment. I saw a scared woman, broken by her own decisions, facing the consequences of years of living in lies. Did she deserve compassion? Part of me wanted to say no. I wanted her to pay for every humiliation, every cruel order, every moment she made me feel invisible. But another part of me, the part that had been a mother all my life, saw something else. She saw someone who had never had what I had given Stephen: unconditional love, security, a place to be vulnerable without fear. "All right," I finally said. "I will give you that chance, but with very clear conditions. First, you are going to seek professional help, a therapist to help you with your money problems and the way you treat people. Second, you are going to get a job. It doesn't matter what, but you are going to contribute to this house in a real way. Third, you are going to treat everyone in this house with basic respect. No more orders, no more cruelty. And fourth, you are going to work on paying your debts yourself without trying to use Stephen's or this family's resources." Diane nodded vigorously. "Yes, all of that. I'll do it. I promise you." "And if you break any of those conditions," I added in a firm voice, "there will be no second chance. You will have to leave. Understood. Understood, she replied in a shaky but clear voice. Stephen looked at me with gratitude and relief. Thank you, Mom, for being a better person than we were to you. The following days brought tangible changes. Stephen helped me move back into the guest room. He himself carried my things, organized my belongings carefully, apologized for every object he had thrown without care weeks ago. Diane enrolled in therapy and began looking for a job. At first it was strange to see her wake up early, dress in simpler clothes, go out to hand in resumes. But she did it. Meals became less tense. We started talking, really talking, about the baby that was coming, about how we wanted her to grow up differently, in a house full of respect and real love, not appearances and lies. One afternoon, 2 months after that confrontation that changed everything, Diane got a job as an administrative assistant in an office. It wasn't the glamorous job she had before, but it was honest. She came home with her first paycheck and showed it to me with something akin to pride. It's not much, she said, but it's mine, clean, no debts behind it. It's a start, I told her with a small smile. Little by little, we learned to live together. It wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, moments when old patterns tried to return. But every time that happened, I remembered the signed documents, my right to be here, my voice that would never be silenced again. And they remembered that I was not furniture that they could move at their convenience. When the baby was born, a beautiful girl with big eyes and dark hair, something definitely changed in all of us. They named her Sophia. And when Diane asked me to hold her for the first time, when she placed that tiny creature in my arms, I saw something genuine in her eyes. Gratitude, respect, and maybe the beginning of real love. I want Sophia to have what I never had, Diane told me that night while I rocked the baby. A grandmother who loves her, a family that is real. I want her to grow up knowing that people are not tools to use, but treasures to care for. Then teach her that, I replied, not with words, but with actions, every day, in every decision. Stephen watched from the doorway with a smile I hadn't seen on his face since he was a child, a smile of genuine peace. This story could have ended very differently. I could have lost my son, my house, my dignity. I could have stayed silent, accepting the mistreatment because I thought I had no options. But I learned something valuable in these months of pain and struggle. I learned that kindness doesn't mean letting people walk all over you, that being nice doesn't mean being weak, that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or allowing the abuse to continue. I learned that sometimes the greatest love is the one that sets boundaries, the one that says enough, the one that demands respect. And I learned that it is never too late to reclaim your voice. It is never too late to stand up for yourself. It is never too late to remind the world and yourself that you have worth, that you deserve dignity, that your life matters. Now, when I look at my granddaughter asleep in my arms, when I see my son being the man I knew he could be, when I see Diane genuinely striving to change, I know it was all worth it. The tears, the pain, the bravery I had to find deep inside myself. This is my house, this is my place, and no one will ever make me forget it again.